We are going to continue our conversation about caves and catacombs. We're going to take a look at the Into the Wild supplement. This is the Overland Adventure. I'm also going to be showing you this template that I made so that I can use my Lord of Maps stamps that I talked about in a previous video. We're also going to take a look at the encounter supplement and how this adds a lot more to the gaming experience. So let's get into this. Welcome to Solitary RPG. In this video, we're going to continue our conversation about caves and catacombs. We are going to look at the Into the Wild supplement. This is the Overland Adventure. For this, we are going to continue using the same characters I used in the first video where we talked about the dungeon exploration and the core mechanics of the game. In order to use the Overland supplement, you do need the core game. If you did not watch that video, I'll put a link in the description. I have Rad, my druid, and Ugg, my fighter. I went ahead and kept them with the equipment that they found in that dungeon, giving them a chance to survive in the Overland adventure. So we are going to continue using them. Also, as I mentioned in the intro, I'm going to use my Lord of Maps stamps to make my map. And I made a little template, and we'll talk a little bit about this when we use it, just to kind of show you what that's all about. So let's get into these rules. Your character creation, your ranger and your druid have some new skills. They get to roll extra dice when foraging or trailblazing. That's a new mechanic that you have to use in the Overland Adventure. And there's some new advantages and disadvantages if you so dare take them. Then you're going to get into the actual exploration rules. There's not a lot to it. It's a pretty straightforward system. This particular system uses a point system. So you have 24 points, each point representing 1 hour of a normal day, because we have a 24-hour day cycle. And you have to spend those points to do certain activities. Those activities can be a variety of different things. You have movement, so it's called trailblazing. So when you move from one hex to the next hex, you automatically have to spend 6 action points to represent 6 hours. Each hex is 6 miles, so technically you're walking 1 mile per point. And that's this breakdown. It's pretty straightforward stuff. It's not complicated at all. And when you are in a hex, you can take on certain things. You can forage for food, you can have an encounter, you can explore a location, different activities, but they do require certain action points. So if you're going to forage for food, you have to spend 1 action point. You're going to roll your d6, and depending on your result, anything a 3 or lower is a failure. You've got nothing. If you roll a 4, you've managed to find the equivalent of 1 provision per character. So depending on how many people are in your party, you give them 1 provision. On a 5, it's 2 provisions, and on a 6, it's 3 provisions per character. So you do have to start tracking your provisions, and you start with 9 provisions, but you can carry up to 15 provisions. Here's your encounters. So when you do have an encounters, instead of it like in a dungeon, you have an encounter, it's in the room, you fight it. Now you can roll for its distance. How far away is that encounter? And there's some penalties and modifiers for handling that. And then what is the encounter doing? Because they're out in the wild. They could be just looking for food themselves. But now with the new rules, you actually can hide or escape from your encounters, especially depending on how far they are away from you. So you have some new combat options for your characters. Resting, this goes into more detail. After spending your 16 action points, adventurers must set up camp. And then when you set up camp, you want to roll for camp encounters. So basically you got a 1 in 6 chance that there's going to be an encounter in your camp. The rules use the high value. So if you roll a d6 while camping, you get a 6, then you get your encounter. And then you have rules here on settlements and side quests. You also have optional weather rules. This thing's can make things a little bit more challenging because it can reduce your number of action points that you receive. And you have modifiers, a -2 modifier to certain skills that you may want to do, and the number of action points looking for food or foraging go up with a modifier to it. So whether if you really want to make things hard, you can do that. Then we get into the gameplay, basically setting up the game and getting started, just like we did in the previous video. There are going to be a lot of charts that you're going to be referring to and rolling on in order to set up each hex and move forward. While I was playing this, I kind of came up with steps that you're going to want to take in order to proceed with each hex, just to make things a little bit easier on yourself, because just like any overland adventure, you can get lost and all kinds of bad things can happen. So let me clear my desk, get all set up, and we will start our overland adventure. So what you're going to need for this game is you're going to need your dice, your d6. I recommend 5 for this game, 4 of one color or type and 1 odd one, just in case you need it. You need some blank paper, eraser, pencil, because you're going to do a lot of marking and on your character sheets. Piece of hex paper, you can get this in a variety of different places. Your rule book, and I'm using my Lord of Maps stamps, but you can draw out or just write in the different features and everything for your exploration. What we're going to want to do is kind of get everything set up. So let's set up our initial hex paper first. So you want to identify a direction of travel. So we'll just do the typical arrow up and say we're going north. I go ahead and number the hexes 1 through 6 in case I need to make a random roll for a direction or something like that. And you want to kind of start somewhat in the center of the page. In this version, this Overland Adventure, there's no chart you roll on for where you're going or what you're doing. When we did the dungeon exploration, there was a chart. We rolled on it. It told us why we were going into the dungeon. For this, you're just overland travel. You're just kind of traveling through the area, checking things out. You can create that narrative if you want to say you're moving in a certain direction till you find like a certain town or a mountain or location. You can do that. That is your agency. That's something you need to inject in these games. This game is really just procedures and how you go about it. You have to create the story. So we're going to start in the center hex. What you can do to decide if you want to be random about it, you can roll on this chart here on page 10. It's a d6 roll across the top. You can be in the desert, forest, grassland, mountain, swamp, or water. And then as we are playing the game, we're going to refer back to this chart to roll up to decide what's in the hexes we are going to. Because my Lord of Maps basically has forest and mountains, I'm going to automatically say we are in the forest because I have stamps that pretty much represent everything here except grasslands. So in the center hex, what we're going to want to do is take the template that I created. I'm going to ink up my tree stamp, set it down. I'm not going to cover the complete hex, but I want to get a bunch of trees in there. And that will be my forest that we are starting in. It is the Forest of Doom. I'm just going to name it that. And you just want to identify it as like your starting forest. So this is where we're at so far. We've got that set up. Now you just want to take a piece of note paper. You want to basically remind yourself you have 24 action points for each day. The rules say you begin the game with 9 provisions and you have to consume a provision per character per day. Give my characters 9 provisions. We're just going to start out with the basics. And those are the 2 resources that you have to track while playing this game. Then we're just going to start with day 1. Like, we're going to wake up from camp and we're going to go exploring the world. What I'm going to do is break everything down into steps. So we're going to have step 1, which is going to be called trailblazing. And this is the first thing you're going to do when you are playing this game, is you want to decide where you're going. So if your narrative is saying you're going north so many days or miles till you find a location, then that's going to be your narrative. If you're just going to randomly explore the world like we're going to do in this video, I'm going to refer to my chart and just say, where's the wind blowing, and we're going to move in that direction, and the wind is blowing to the 6, so we're going to be going in this direction here. So what we have to do is, we've decided the direction we're going to go. We need to spend our action points, and that's what trailblazing is. You got to spend 6 action points to move in a direction, and then you roll on the chart. And the trailblazing chart's pretty simple. If you roll a 3 or lower, you are lost. And then you have to remain in the hex that you're in and spend another 6 action points and roll again. You were completely lost. If you roll a 4, you're lost, but you eventually find your way. You have to spend another 3 action points. If you roll a 5 or higher, everything's fine. You know where you're going, you're following the wind, and everything is great. You could narratively give yourself the benefit of the doubt on the first hex. Like, you have a plan, you kind of know the direction you're going. Maybe someone pointed it to you, maybe you've been traveling that way. You could give yourself the first hex, but every hex after that, you definitely have to roll. We're going to roll just to see what happens. So we spent our 6, we're rolling our trailblazing roll. We rolled a 3. So I'll just write that down, and we failed. So now we're spending another 6 action points, and we roll again. I rolled a 5, so we move on, so we pass. So now we go on to step 2, which is populating the hex that we're moving to. So we go back to our book, and we go to our chart here, and we roll on this chart to see what goes in this hex. So I rolled a 4. That's going to be grasslands. This is the one stamp I do not really have for the Lord of Maps, but what we can do is just put in some dashes like that to represent our grasslands. And this is going to be our first hex that we're exploring. So I'll just put a number 1 right there. So we got grasslands. And you can just write that down on your notes here for step 2, is that you got the grasslands. Step 3 is features. So now we're going to roll on the chart for step 3 to see what features are in our grasslands. So I'm just breaking this down as we play, so that you're seeing how everything unfolds. This is a D12 roll. I rolled a 4, which is nothing. So that is just written down here as nothing. And that completes the first, basically, phase. Like, we've done our first exploration. We've already spent 12 action points. And like I said earlier, after spending 16 action points, you have to rest. We've already spent 12 action points. So I'm already half done. So I already need to set up camp, because I've spent 12 hours of my day going through the 2 hexes. What we're going to have to do now is make a decision, because after we spent 16 action points, we have to rest. And you need to consider action points are a resource. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a forage roll and just see what happens. So this isn't necessarily a step. This is going to be an action that we're going to take during step 3. And we're going to go foraging for some food. And you have to spend 1 action point. and do a skill check. And you got a chart here that you will roll on. I rolled a 2. You fail to find any provisions and end up drawing unwanted attention. We're going to roll on the encounter tables. So while we were foraging for food, we've come across an encounter. So this is where things need to shift a little bit in this video, because in the Overland Adventure book that says you referred to an encounter table, well, that reference to that encounter table goes to the encounter book, which we have not talked about yet. So let's jump a little bit ahead in this video and get into the encounters book, because it's a really great book. So when we did the first video and we talked about the combat, we had some very basic encounters that we could face, you know, orcs, goblins, death knights, things like that. And they're pretty straightforward, pretty simple. They had their attack values, their defense values, and their vitality. You fought them, you won or lost, and that was the end of it. Now with this supplement, a lot more is added to the game, because it is just full of different encounters that you can come across. And not only do the encounters give more descriptive information, they have special abilities, they have special actions, such as this orc. You roll a d6. On a 1 to 5, it does a normal attack, but on a 6, it does a strong attack, which gives it a +1. Breaks things down by like a basic orc and a chieftain, and it just gives you more details to work with and just makes combats a little bit more fun. The way the encounters are broken down, they're broken down by the types of encounters they would be. So like, these are demons, and it's in alphabetical order, so your demons are first, and then it's going to go into the giants. So here are all your giants, and it's just going to keep going on. Like, here's your humanoids and other folks, and then you'll get into your undead, and it's broken down like that. So you're probably going to want to tab this section out so that it's easier to find what you're looking for, because, you know, goblins aren't just going to be under G next to the giants. You've got to find the subtype that they're in and then go looking for them in their subtype, which is under the humanoids, because goblins are kind of humanoids. And there's your goblins. So that's the first thing you need to be aware of. Still love this public domain art. Very cool stuff. So all these encounters, like I said, this is the thickest book of them all when you're printing them out, so be aware of that. There's just a lot of encounters, which is awesome and really can change your game quite a bit. And then here you get random events. So now you're going to pull in cards, playing cards, and you can give yourself random events, which is actually going to change some of your skill checks, because some of the random events are going to give you modifiers to your skill checks. So it talks a little bit about that here for you, just so you're not surprised by it. And then it gets into all the different random events that can take place. Again, this is what's adding that agency. This is what's making the game exciting and fun to play. But then here in the back, you've got a bunch of charts. And these charts are to make life a little bit more thematic. So you have difficulty levels. So if you want to have an easy dungeon, things have changed a little bit. There's some special rules, like for level 1, an easy dungeon. Some of the modifiers have changed. Now we're seeing the +3, +2, +3, like I talked about in my first video, because I thought times was too much. So we went to plus. And here there's also a special note that there's no encounters in the corridors, so that you're only going to have encounters in the room, making it easy, giving you an opportunity to build your character up for your encounters. And then it's going to grow from there. The difficulty levels are going to start getting harder, and you're going to build your characters up a little bit, get yourself some better weapons, get yourself some skill modifiers, and your encounters are going to get harder for the different dungeon levels. And then you have special enemies that you can pull from if you wanted to make your dungeons more thematic. You can just roll off the Blood Knight tables, or the Corrupted Clerics, or the Priest, or the Paladins, Necromancers, Shadow Assassins. You can just theme your charts based off that. And that you're just, everything's kind of linked together, making it more thematic for your adventures. And then you have different location types for dungeons. So if your dungeons, if you got the catacombs or the citadel or the crypts, you can have things that are more thematic to those. I love these charts. This is what's adding that agency to the game, giving you something more to pull from so that you can get a little bit more immersed into the story, and everything's linked together. You're just not making random rolls on random charts. And we continue on back here. We got the same thing for coastlines in the Arctic, but now we get into the location types. So when you're playing the Overland Adventures, you need to have these charts available because these are going to be your encounters. This is 3d6, so I have 18 encounters, and this is what can pop up when I'm in the forest looking for food. I stumble across, and I'm going to roll this on the side. Let me just slide this over. So that one's cocked. So we rolled 7, 8, 9, and an orc. So we disrupted an orc, and if we go across the tables here, 3 attack, 3 defense, 6 vitality, and it's 1 per player. So we've got 2 orcs. So let me get my information written down because this is going to be our combats. Now that I've written that down, we're going to have orc number 1, orc number 2. This is where we're going to go into the combat, so you need your character sheets. We surprise the orcs, so we're going to add the thematic part of this. This is our agency that we're going to incorporate as we're foraging for food, and we're pushing back shrubs, and we're just kind of looking for some berries and grubs and things like that. We stumble across 2 orcs, and we surprise them. Ugg pulls out his sword and he swings. So combat, it's the same type of a combat system that we used before. We're going to roll our 3d6 for Ugg. He gets a +1 to his rolls. We're looking for, all right, so I rolled a 2, a 3, and a 3. So this means with my +1, my highest value is a 4. So this means I hit one of the orcs, and I will do 4 points of damage. So the first orc, I'm going to go through their defense, and they're going to be at -1 vitality. However, they're going to hit me back, because that's how 4 works. And they have an attack value of 3, so 3 points of my armor is spent. So now it would be Rad's turn. I'm going to have Rad entangle them so that they cannot attack. And then next turn we'll both attack because they will be entangled. That will consume their response to us, and we'll be able to have a chance to get rid of these orcs before things get too bad. Spells work the same way. You got to roll a d6, but on a 4, the consequence of rolling a 4 is that I have to forget another spell, which means I only have 2 spells. Transformation is a special characteristic just for the druid. So we roll. I rolled a 5, so entanglement goes off, so I no longer have this spell. But now the orcs are entangled. The wolf is going to go in while they're entangled because we're going first. So the wolf has 2 attack dice and fails miserably. Snake eyes. Dang wolf. Maybe the wolf got entangled too when it went into attack, or it ended up biting like a tree, like a root that was entangling him, and thought that was the orc, and got a little confused on what he was supposed to be doing. All right, so that ends our first turn, but because they are entangled, they get no actions this go around, so we get to attack again. We will start with Ugg rolling his dice. He rolled a 6. Giving him another +1. Doesn't matter though, he does 4 points of damage, so damage carries over in this game. Their vitality's 6 though, so We're just going to be another -4. So that's just going to put the first orc down to 1 vitality point left. So what we'll have is we'll have Rad go in for a swing with his longsword. See if he can do anything. And all threes. That was terrible. He failed. And now we'll do the wolf. The wolf figures out what he's supposed to do. He does 2 points of damage. So that will take care of the first one, and it will be -1 on the defense of the second one. But now that orc breaks free. The way I interpret that rule is he's spending his action that turn to break free. He does not get a combat back. So we will get 1 more round of combat. This is what I like about this game. You have to interpret a lot of the rules. They are not laid out like a larger RPG system that lays out everything. You interpret stuff, you figure it out, and you make it work however you want it to work. This is how I run entangling roots. I basically say they lose their action, and the turn that they lose is when they're breaking free and they don't get to fight back. So we basically get a free round of combat. But we're going to go one more time with Ugg here. Ugg rolled a 4, but with his +1 takes it to a 5. So that is a success, doing 4 points of damage. So we will go through all of the defense, and we'll start taking away some of the vitality, which would be 2 points of vitality. So the last orc is down to 4 points of vitality. Let's see if the druid can hit this turn. Yes, we got the 5, so the druid will do 3 points of damage. And if you're curious where the damage is coming from, your attack value for the weapons that you're carrying is the amount of damage that you do. And now the wolf's turn. Can the wolf take out the last orc? Yes, the orc is gone. So that ends the orcs. What we can do now is collect our treasures. So what we're going to have to do is go back to the orcs chart. Now I already screwed up, and some of you might have caught this. And this is how I play my games. I make a lot of mistakes. I used just the basic stats, and I did not use their special attacks or any of the cool new features that I was talking about when I talked about the monster books. Remember, I was talking about their special actions and their special abilities. I totally forgot all about that. And it's a me thing, because I just started reading through this and getting exposed to all this and recording a video and doing everything that I do. Sometimes I forget to do things on camera. So I forgot to do all this. But we can take their treasure, which gives us leather armor, shield, flail, and 2 coins. And I don't know if a flail is worth taking. I do like my long swords, but we can take all of the other things. The leather armor will repair our armor, and our shields, replace our shields, all of that kind of stuff. And that is what we get to do with our combat. Let's try not to forget about that next go around. But that ends that, and that all cost 1 more action point, because combats cost an action point. So we are losing action points pretty quickly. So we lost 12, 13, 14. So we are at -14 action points. It would take another 6 action points to move on to the next hex, and then we'll be over our allotment. And if we don't rest and set up camp, then we're going to be at penalties and all that negative stuff. So we're going to go on to step 4, which is we need to rest. And we have to set up camp. So once you've spent your 16 action points, the adventurers must set up camp using their remaining 8 action points. So we're at 14 action points. We need to use another 8. So another -8, which is going to put us at 22 action points spent. leaving us with a balance of only 2 action points. And I need to save those 2 action points just in case I get into a combat while camping. So we are camping in the grasslands. You can mark this as like camp, or you can put a C, do whatever you feel you need to do to identify that on your map to say that that's where you camped. It was this getting lost on the first step that really chewed up a lot of our action points. Once you've set up camp, you're going to make a camping encounter roll. This is where if you roll a 6, you have an encounter. I rolled a 4. I saw the 6 spinning there for a second. So I have no camping encounter roll. We sleep through the night. We rest. We're all energized and ready for the next day. We're also going to be spending our provisions because we have to eat while we're camping. So we're at -2 provisions right now. So we still have enough to continue adventuring, but we are going to need to find some provisions. So now we just go on to day 2. Nothing eventful happened. We've done our 4 steps. So now we're on to day 2. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go trailblazing and decide where we're going to go. We have our 24 action points and we are down to 7 provisions for the day. So we're just tallying everything up as we go, and we will do one more hex here. So let's see what random direction we're going to go today. I treat the random direction kind of like I do with the dungeon exploration. So if I end up going back to my starting square, I'll give myself 1 reroll and take it from there. But which direction are we going to go? We're going to go 1. So we're going to go in this direction. And then we need to spend our 6 action points. We're going space 1. Trailblazing. Do we make it? Like, do we get lost again? I get lost again. So I get lost again. I'm not good with directions. I just don't know what I'm doing. So if we got a 1, we got to roll on a random event. So what is our random event? We come over to the random event table here. And this is a 2d6 chart. What is our random event? We rolled an 8. Nothing happens. So we just got lost. And that's pretty much it. We're going to spend another 6 action points for trailblazing. And I rolled a 3. Again, I may not make it out of this hex. So this is one of the challenges. Then we roll the random event. Sorry. 3. This might actually cause something because this is a lowered value on the event. A 3 is a natural phenomenon. So we got lost again, and we rolled a 3 for the events. And that is going to be a phenomenon. So now we go to our tables for the natural phenomenons for force. Phenomenons. I love saying that. Is a 1. So a 1 is a blossom blizzard. So this is basically like I live in Arizona. We have a lot of pollen in the summertime from certain trees, and when the wind blows you see like this yellow cloud in the sky of all the blossom from like the mesquite trees and some of the other desert trees that we have. That's kind of how I see this taking place. So this is a spectacle of petals cascading like floral snowfall from blossoming trees. So we get caught in that. But what does that mean? Like, how does that affect this as your agency? Maybe this is why we're lost. Like this, the sky is just covered in all this blossom, and this is why we're lost. I've already spent 12 action points. We can't see, we can't do anything. We're just stuck. Like we're just locked into this area, and we can't move forward. So we need to bunker down and camp and forage for food and repeat this process of Overland Adventure as we continue to play the Caves of Catacombs. And that's kind of how the process works. I didn't get very far because you can see you can get lost really easy. However, if you are playing your cards right and you take the Ranger, you get to add an extra dice to your trailblazing skill check, which is probably something recommended because you saw what was happening with me is I kept getting lost and I was just chewing up my action points. So it's a fun little supplement, just like the dungeon supplement though. You have to create the agency, you have to create the purpose of why you're exploring the world. I do kind of like the point system, that resource management system that you have to maintain while you're playing, because it just makes things more interesting. You have to hold some of those resources back because if you get an encounter while camping, you have to have an action point for that combat because every combat costs 1 action point. And that's just an important thing because if you don't rest and you don't recuperate, now you're taking a -1 penalty for all your tests that you're doing because you don't have the action points. You're exhausted. You marched and marched and marched and got lost and used up all your action points. And when you're resting at camp, you get that encounter, you got to use another action point. So it's best to make sure that you have 1 or 2 left. So that way you can do it. So it's a little bit of, that resource management. So I just like it. And I like how everything's broken down with the charts here, giving you some of that immersion into the different areas so that you can create that narrative story. And then now as you saw in the video, I screwed up and I didn't use all the new features for my orc encounter. But you have this new creature manual that just adds so much more to the game, giving you more narrative information about who you're encountering and charts and tables to roll on, just to make your encounters more exciting and not just simple, they swing and hit, you swing and hit, basic stuff. They can do different types of attacks. They have some special features and abilities. The hard thing is just remembering to use them. And that might be where I might take the encounter book out and make a spiral bound encounter book so I can flip through it, have that opened while I'm playing instead of having everything into one book, kind of create that as a separate manual. And then I want to also start using these random events. I did not use them for this particular game, but you have all these different random events that you can start pulling from and things like that. Plus you have some encounter tables in the back. So that's just my look through on the other 2 supplements for Caves and Catacombs. I do think it's a great game because the rules don't get in the way of the game. This is a game that's really meant for you to create your own agency to the game and to have your purpose for what you're doing. It's not going to give you detailed rules like you might see in some of the more published games like a Pathfinder or D&D or something like that. You're not going to have rules for everything. This is more old school gaming where you have to make the rules up as you're playing, kind of like being the judge in original Dungeons and Dragons where they didn't have a rule for everything. Somebody had to make those decisions. You're kind of doing that with this. But I do like the fact that this is all inspired by HeroQuest. It's just really cool because if I want to have miniatures out, I can just pull my HeroQuest miniatures out and start playing with those. I can use the board for HeroQuest and just have some fun with it. But that's just my look through on everything for Caves and Catacombs. Thank you very much for watching and have a great day.